Welcome, everyone. We are just going to give everybody a couple of minutes to join before we get started, but we'll get started here in about a minute or two. But thanks for joining us today. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everybody, wherever you're joining from. My name is Letty Barrett. I am on the marketing team here at Verusen, and we're so happy to have you today for our Ask the Expert webinar series to talk about how AI is helping you make sense of your messy materials data. We've got an awesome session today, so we're super excited and really thrilled that y'all are taking the time to join us here. A couple of quick things. So we will be recording the session. So we'll send a follow-up email afterwards that contains that recording and ways to connect with us. In addition, at the end of the recording or at the end of the webinar session, we'll have time for Q&A. But if any questions come up during our session together, go ahead and feel free, excuse me, to put those in the Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll get to those and answer those. And always feel free to reach out to us afterwards as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. I mean, we have done endless data cleanses. We've all had the latest ERP technologies. We've had teams of data scientists, but we are left with the same dirty, incomplete data year to year, and the same data that you had the year before, and it's exhausting. And so today we're talking about how manufacturing organizations are finally starting to rely on AI technology to really make sense of their messy manufacturing materials data. So joining us today, we've got the data experts themselves. We've got Korta Mackey, who is a senior data scientist on the Verusen team. And prior to joining Verusen, Korta was at the Carnegie Mellon University's Language Technologies Institute, was researching computational sociolinguistics. That is quite a mouthful. And then we've got Lily Gordon joining Korta, and Lily is the manager of our onboarding team here at Verusen. And prior to joining Verusen, Lily served as a software consultant at Manhattan Associates and the Experience Group. So welcome both of you. I'll give you just a quick second to say hello and introduce yourself a little bit more. Lily, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Letty. Yes, my name is Lily Gordon. I've been with Verusen for over 2 years now. And the primary goal of our onboarding team here at Verusen is to understand our customer data and get it transferred and transformed over into the Verusen platform. So we are a very data-focused team and have spent countless hours working with our customers on their data.
Awesome. Thanks, Lily. I'll throw it over to you, Korta.
Hey folks, yeah, my name is Korta Mackey. I have been with Verusen 3 years as of this month. And yeah, I work predominantly in data understanding, building models that can make sense out of data that is often a little bit disparate, noisy, has a lot of variation in it. You know, that kind of was a natural flow from my background, believe it or not, because, you know, sociolinguistics is all about using statistics to understand the variation in data in human speech. And then, you know, the computational piece of it just helps bridge it even more and naturally flows into natural language processing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all these other technologies. So.
That's awesome. Thanks for a little bit of background. I appreciate that. Data experts, to say the least, that's for sure. It's awesome to have y'all here today. So let's dive in. It's 2023. We're about a quarter of the way through, and we're still dealing with bad data. Manufacturing organizations are plagued by this bad data, and I'm sure supply chain professionals 10, 15, 20 years ago would have never thought we'd still be dealing with these issues today. Why is it happening? How is it happening? So that is what we're going to talk about today. And no matter the reason that you're bringing to the table, whether it's M&A activity, whether it's just the sheer amount of data, whether it's supplier data variability, the list goes on and on and on. But regardless your reason, bad data at the end of the day is expensive. And we all know the current market conditions, and we all know that we can't afford to live with bad data. So, a lot of times expensive technologies and solutions are used to solve for the bad data issues, but really they're just adding fuel to the fire. And it's time to talk about a new way to deal with messy data. And that is what we're super excited to talk to you all about today. So let's talk about it. Korta, Lily, your backgrounds, your experience are extremely applicable here. So it's probably safe to say you've seen some bad data, and y'all work with our customers and customers on a daily basis and see really firsthand how customers are challenged when they have bad data, how it's become such a barrier to making good decisions and things like that. So I'll start with you, Lily. Talk to me about what you're observing. What are the specific issues that they're having with data?
While going through data discoveries, the number one problem customers come to me with is that their data lives all over the place. And this totally makes sense. The disparity of systems is often due to mergers, acquisitions, facility age, lack of investment, the list goes on. All this makes it very susceptible to mismanagement. And a pain point for our customers is that MRO especially is not updated, managed, or governed as accurately and frequently as direct materials, for example. They're seeing an incomplete picture of data because MRO data is not in your face on a day-to-day basis as direct materials may be. But what happens when a machine goes down that needs a particular part for repair that inconveniently stocked out a few weeks ago, wasn't caught by anyone on the floor due to this, lack of governance. We don't want our customers to experience that kind of stress. We get that companies go through acquisitions as they scale. Therefore, relying on these multiple disconnected systems of data that makes it very difficult to pull together a complete picture of all the existing materials that they have on hand. We embrace the fact that data is going to look ugly and live in multiple places, and we get that. We get that our customers are moving fast, trying to keep up with their data as best they can. So on our side, we take the incomplete data, transform it, and utilize AI to help with these heaps of data.
Awesome. Thank you, Lily. It's funny, at the beginning, as you were talking, it's funny you mentioned about the mismanagement of data, specifically as an example, MRO. I've actually felt personally that bit of stress and confusion and frustration because prior to Verusen, I was at a pulp and paper manufacturer within their sourcing and procurement group, and specifically was an MRO analyst. And I remember needing to send weekly, monthly reports to my manager of our category spend breakdown. And I would get into the details. We had a BI tool that was supposed to make this pretty easy, a couple clicks, a couple seconds. But what ended up being my experience was I'd get into the tool, I'd be really excited to use it. And then I would start to click in and realize that everything felt like it was mismanaged or miscategorized. And that was due to the fact that we were using a centralized strategy and purchasing strategy. But the reality is that there are different facilities, different teams, different materials, all using different names. And I'd find, a specific category within a different category, and I couldn't really trust the data. So it became this manual process for a tool that was supposed to take away the manual process. And so it was a really frustrating feeling. I was having to spend my time doing things that shouldn't take as long as they did. It was really, really frustrating. So thanks for talking to that and giving that example. I think that's helpful. And I'm sure there's several people on the phone that can resonate with that as well. Korta, I'd love to kind of hand it over to you if there are any other challenges that come to mind when we're talking about this that you've also seen.
Yeah, of course. So Lily mentioned, both that data is incomplete and out of date, oftentimes in these systems, but what we also see, and this speaks a little bit to what you were talking about, Letty, that data, gets entered in ways that make it hard to work with. And so this can happen as a result of humans, and sometimes it's exacerbated by policy. I would say oftentimes the structures that a company might put in place to try to keep their data clean actually slow down operations to the extent that individuals find a way to get around that, and they'll just put something into the system as, just other, because they don't want to spend the time finding the exact link that it needs to be connected to. But many companies don't even have that kind of structure in their policies. And so in those cases, you can see customers that have 12 copies of the same manufacturer in their system. And it's all just under slightly different names, or even sometimes the same name. And if you're trying to do materials creation within a system that's having these issues, there's almost no way for you to fix it on the fly. And so it just continues to get worse. The other way that I would say that these things arise is just as a result of the systems themselves. I feel like, the way that I view this data is that every system, every little change that's happened in the past, whether it's an acquisition or a migration to a new platform, it leaves fingerprints in the data. And you end up seeing these things, and the more you work with data that came from different backgrounds, the more you start to see patterns and understand that, oh, this means that it was saved in SAP, or it was saved in Excel, or what have you, because it ends up maybe not entirely corrupting the data, but especially as these things cascade, as they chain together, you can wind up with data that looks a little different and is much harder to work with than what you started out with.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I love what you were talking about earlier, because really the reality is that within a supply chain organization, you've got procurement and sourcing that are looking to reduce costs and save money. And then you've got operations that's looking to reduce unplanned downtime. So naturally the two, you can be friends, but when you're trying to do two completely different things that have traditionally worked against each other, you're really set up for failure to make good purchasing decisions. And it's exactly what you talked about. You end up finding just a variation of different naming conventions for the same type of material at the end of the day, which can be such a headache, such a nightmare. And with all that being said, I mean, I think even in these first couple of minutes, we've addressed the fact that bad data causes you just to be stressed and confused and make poor purchasing decisions across your network. And you may want the right things for your organization and your team, but at the end of the day, you want to get your job done. But when you've got bad data, it's really hard to do that well. So I know you talked about some of those challenges, Porta, but let's talk about the real consequence. I know there are hard dollar values here, but I'd love to hear just your opinion on really why organizations are starting to care about this today. What's really the why, the so what of this?
Well, at the end of the day, it's not just your operational efficiency, it's your revenue, it's your business's actual use case. So, if you have an asset that relies on some critical part, you may try to keep that part in stock, but if you can't find it in your system, then you're going to have to expedite and overnight that part from the manufacturer, or worse, you find that the manufacturer can't ship it quickly enough. And your asset is down for, long enough to really start to cost you. And so I would say that, especially if you're at an organization where your data is spread across multiple systems, or, even just you're trying to manage data that lives, the actual physical inventory lives at multiple different warehouses or plants. All of these challenges just compound on each other and make it harder and harder to run a smooth system.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, that's well said. And I think it's interesting to think about market conditions also affecting this. I think we see every so often the pendulum kind of swings from reduced risk to reduced cost. You know, we were focused on reducing risk during COVID, and we've teetered back and forth. And obviously, with the current market conditions, organizations are very focused on reducing costs at this point. And when bad data can cost you your revenue and really affects your bottom line, it matters. And organizations we're seeing are ignited to change this because they're tired of seeing their bottom line consistently impacted by bad data. And you know, it's interesting because we're seeing this passion for change in the industry, but we actually recently did a state of supply chain survey to really gauge what's going on in the supply chain. And I found this so interesting because 95% of the respondents to our survey were using tools that are not purpose-built, and using tools like spreadsheets, like Excel, to really optimize things like their inventory or their materials management, which was so shocking to me because that's not worked for so many years. And that's been the barrier for so many organizations to do these manual processes in Excel spreadsheets that take a long time, that are exported from multiple different systems, that are outdated and whatnot. But I found that so interesting that that's their optimization tool. And so I thought I'd share that. And speaking of, I think, Lily, you specifically have probably seen some failed data projects in your day from your previous role and just working in your role now with customers. So I'd love to hear how you are seeing customers having previously attempted to solve data problems. And are these approaches working? It sounds like they probably aren't, but talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And you know what? I've seen my fair share of spreadsheets passed over by customers. So it's very common. And a lot of customers I talk with, they recently came off master data management or data cleansing projects, thinking that would be the solution. A majority of our customers have tried this approach in the past, but shortly after, they tend to realize it's not a long-term answer or solution, because as soon as that data gets cleansed, the project completes, and then there's no change management to ensure that the data stays nice and clean moving forward. And these projects are what they are. They're projects. They have a beginning, they have an end. They can help with that one-time improvement, but I don't see them continuously offering new insights. They're just not that sustainable or long-term solutions. And not to mention, everyone always mentions they're costly, resource heavy. They prevent your strong resources from focusing on other high value projects and improvements that, you know, you don't want to be losing sight of. Yeah, so a lot of customers have gone through them in the past, and it's just not the answer they're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to hear. And it's funny you say that, because it reminds me, if you've been around Verusen long enough, you maybe recognize this term that we've used around death of the data cleanse. It sounds silly, but we did a whole series around it. And it sounds like organizations are starting to move away from things like data cleansing, or just the idea of trying to get your data in a perfect place. But that concept is true because it's not getting the results that they need and that they want in order to move forward. So yeah, Quarta, I know we've heard from Lily, but you know, I think we can agree that things like MDM projects or these short-term projects and spreadsheets aren't the answer. But if I think about it, if I'm a Fortune 500 company, I've got teams and teams of data analysts, of IT teams, of data scientists, et cetera, that I think I could just allocate to this data problem. And I know my data best. So why can't I do that? What's the downside, I guess, of doing that with it, you know, building it internally?
Yeah, I think the question that you're really asking is kind of build versus buy. And this is definitely more of a philosophical question, right? I think once you get to this point where you've decided that this is a challenge you really want to tackle and your company needs to solve, then you're putting your money down, to say like, actually, we are going to solve this. We're going to have this project, this initiative to make this happen. Much in the same way that you would like a data cleanse project, but you're trying to solve it once and for all. So you have the data scientists, or you hire them, you try to get them started. It could take a year, it could take 18 months, before you start to see any value out of this kind of initiative. And meanwhile, you're still suffering from all of the challenges that you've had all along, the whole reason that you're talking about this in the first place.
Right.
But you still have to pay for a lot of the same sorts of infrastructure pieces that you would be able to kind of amortize through a platform like Verusen. Things like your cloud infrastructure, overhauling your data pipeline, all of the things that you need to kind of spend money and time to develop yourself. And then at the end of the day, you may or may not get the same results that we're already able to provide with our tool. One thing to note is that because we're an AI platform, we build off of the network effect. The fact that all the customers, all the companies working within Verusen have made the tool smarter and sharper, and we've been able to iterate and solve this problem tens of times in a way that works. And I think at this point all but guarantee 2 to 3 times ROI, where I don't know that you have that confidence going into an in-house project.
Yeah, I think thanks for sharing that. I think that's super helpful to hear and think about. I mean, you can be an expert, but know that it's going to take too many resources, too much time, too much effort to do it internally. And there are other ways to lean on, things like AI and teams that are dedicated to solving your problems. And I think, so at the end of the day, I think we can agree that the concept of cleansing your data or getting your data to a perfect place in order to make these better materials purchasing decisions is not the answer. Data cleanses aren't the answer anymore. But I do think it's interesting to maybe pause here and think about, before what is the answer, what might be the answer, what is it that customers most need out of their platform? So we've heard that, or out of their systems, we've heard that, data is across different systems and different naming conventions and causing all of these challenges. But what is it that they're longing for, that they need at the end of the day? Lily, I know you're probably super in tune with what that is, working with customers on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I'd say a wish list item that I often see with our customers is to have all of their data living in one centralized view, rather than digging through the data that lives in all these siloed processes. And I have a great example of this. A large gas and electric company that I work pretty closely and regularly with, they started to regularly bring in users to the platform simply for the search capabilities. With their own ERP, it takes them tens of clicks to look through the information on a material to understand its movement history and purchasing trends. And then what happens when you want to compare that material to a couple other materials? It exponentially increases. So what should be a simple task becomes a 20-click nightmare.
Yeah, that's a good one. That should be, I should take that for the marketing team. I like that. It's,
I'll give it to you, Letty. Go for it.
20-click nightmare. I mean, I think, and that's generous, if not more, between several different systems and things like that. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it just sounds like it takes too much time, too much money, too much effort to get these things done, to try to get your data in a place that honestly ends up being suboptimal, because you get back to your day-to-day basis and you're making decisions, your teams are making progress, making purchasing decisions, and the data already becomes outdated again, almost immediately becomes dirty. So it's interesting to talk about. But I do think, just based on what's going on in the supply chain, there's really a shift happening for manufacturing, and leaders are really understanding that the goal is not to get clean, perfect data anymore. That was like the holy grail, was data hygiene for so many years. But really, it's about what you do with that data, how you can understand that data for your teams to use it. Doesn't matter how you get to that point, but just that your teams are able to use it. That's the powerful thing. And that's what teams are really needing to do. And they've been held back for so long. And if you only need to understand it, data cleanses might not be the only way that you can get to that point for your teams to be able to use it. So I know we've talked a lot about data. I didn't know I could say data and so many times in such a short amount of time, but it's so relevant to what is happening in the market and what organizations are challenged with today. But I think we'll pivot a little bit here and maybe move to some more lighter stuff, maybe talk about what hope is out there for manufacturing organizations and their data challenges, because obviously AI is an extremely hot topic right now, especially generative AI, ChatGPT, all of that. But we're not specifically here to talk about that. But I do think it is helpful, because AI all gets thrown in one bucket, and you hear something about ChatGPT and you think, okay, well, that's got to be the case for all AI. So I think I'd love to lean on you, Korta, here, because you are the AI expert. I think it'd be helpful to just think through and share what AI is, a little bit of what AI is versus what it's not, because I'm sure there's maybe some folks on the phone that are a little unfamiliar or uneasy around AI, but I think it'd be awesome to have you weigh in here to help clarify.
Great. Yeah. So AI, or machine learning in general, is just a technology that enables you to take data and make sense of it, which is exactly the use case that we're talking about here. But more specifically, it learns to recognize patterns within data, and kind of, especially in the case of these generative models, can somewhat fill in the gaps, maybe sometimes better than others. But in the case of something like ChatGPT, I would say, it's a general purpose model, right? It's designed to just handle like language as a task, which is pretty underspecified. And so some of the issues that you see with it, like hallucinating facts or not really understanding certain contexts or social cues, I think comes in part out of the fact that it's such a general purpose solution that's trying to solve, it's boiling the ocean is how I would express it. And even if you have an ocean of data, if it's MRO inventory or some sort of structured data that's there for a specific use case that we can learn on, then that type of specific use case, you can have a purpose-built AI that can solve that, I think, a lot cleaner than a general purpose model could. At the same time, though, you have a lot of concern, and I think it's well-founded from just the general public, with people worried that AI is going to take away jobs. And that can definitely be true in some use cases, and there's some uncertain futures ahead, policies, how things will be regulated, what all of this is going to look like as we get more and more reliant on AI to optimize our processes and the like. At the same time, in our use case, when you're talking about inventory optimization or data harmonization, these aren't necessarily solutions that existed before AI made that possible. And so I would say, unless your organization has a team of statisticians that's just like dedicated to digging into your goods movement history or just other data that lives in some forgotten corner of your database, Unless you have that team, I don't know what a tool like Verusen would be replacing at your org. So one way that I've heard it framed, I think this came from a customer, was that, you know, AI gives you superpowers. It lets you look at all of the data that as a human would be impossible for you to make any sense of. And then really it helps you capture the institutional knowledge that exists within these sort of siloed organizational structures. All of the people at your organization, you know, kind of the lifeblood of the company, the reason that you're able to work with the data despite all of the challenges, people aren't a permanent investment. And so, you know, the institutional knowledge, all of the nuances and techniques that have been kind of learned within your organization, if you don't invest in capturing that somehow, those people will leave and your organization will have to kind of recreate that knowledge through experience. And so a tool like Verusen, or, you know, perhaps other AI tools could capture this and learn from it in a way that will help you sustain your operations even without that continuity that you've been so reliant on with these data challenges.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. That was really helpful to hear the differentiation. I really appreciated that. And it's funny you say that, because it reminded me of a situation when I was back within the sourcing and procurement group as an MRO analyst. And I remember I was working through a spend leverage project of consolidating supplier spend to more strategic suppliers. And I remember having to pick up my office phone and call individual facilities and ask them questions about particular materials that we were looking to strategically move to be with more strategic suppliers. And oftentimes the answer I got was, well, no, so-and-so said we need to actually have that on the shelf for this reason. And it's just all those same particular stories or similar stories that end up being the case, but you end up losing that knowledge, because a lot of times individuals had left the company, but we were still practicing those same decisions or losing that data. And so it is really important and really critical to be able to capture that institutional knowledge as we're having an entire generation leaving the workforce, which I know is extremely relevant to today's market. And Corta, let me just ask you maybe one follow-up question, which I think is always, I love examples. So it's helpful to maybe hear an example of how AI is able to recognize two different materials that are named completely different as the same material in a matter of seconds versus, me calling up a particular facility and verifying if this material is that material.
Right. Yeah. So one of our major products that we offer within the trusted material kind of platform within Verusen is this data harmonization. And so this is what enables us to provide a recommendation preemptively, sort of proactively, for a user to review when they have spare time. And it pairs up pairs of materials that the AI believes may have similarities based on the text, based on the numbers, based on the manufacturer information. All of this gets processed and analyzed in a way that's able to look within a catalog, which may be millions of materials. And then, if you have 1 million materials and you want to compare those against 1 million materials, that search space gets into the trillion scale. And so, our algorithm actually only recommends about 2,000 out of every trillion possible matches for you to review. And then still manages to get approaching 60% performance. When you review those, you'll actually find duplicated materials within your database that in order to come across, you would have had to be searching for that material and then see them both come up, or maybe, if there are any differences in the spellings, like any abbreviations in the text, any like differences in the ways that the MPN is written in the database, our system may be able to find that where you wouldn't even see those on a single search in SAP.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think the most important piece there is really about how you're creating the digital footprint for your materials, rather than having to rely on the physical and the manual crib crawls or inventory audits and things like that, so that you're quickly and easily able to find those matches and identify those materials that you're looking for. And that's actually the entire reason why our founder, Paul Noble, started Verusen, was because he was on that side of doing those manual crib crawls and inventory audits, and figured there had to be a better way. And I think it's exactly what you're talking through, Portia, of really creating that digital footprint for those materials and being able to locate them in such a short amount of time, and multiplied efforts compared to what one person would be able to do with their time. So I know, speaking of time, we're coming up on time a little bit, but I do want to jump into kind of a vision of a better state, and what, the elephant in the room is really that organizations are trying to find obvious, quick ways to cut costs without increasing risk. Those are top priorities, kind of like what we talked about earlier. And so oftentimes tech stacks can be the consequence, or what's sacrificed there. And believe it or not, there are several studies that show supply chain leaders are continuing to invest in technology. In fact, in a recent study with Supply Chain Industry Report from MHI, 64% of companies that were surveyed reported they were increasing their technology investments in 2023 into their supply chain, because they're finding, like Portia said earlier, they're finding that they can provide these high ROI numbers with low cost, low effort. And so I'm curious, Portia, if you can share some of these results that, we're talking about AI and it's fun and fancy and all this stuff, but let's talk real numbers. What are some of the things that AI can help deliver for these organizations?
Great. Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, we've had quite a few companies come through the Verusen platform and see a lot of value. One thing I mentioned earlier was the data harmonization, this sort of deduplication that the system kind of screens and runs suggested matches for you. That's already found 60,000 plus duplicate records across our customers' databases.
Wow.
And so, it's hard to quantify the exact dollar value of that kind of impact, but when you consider that each of those materials is an opportunity for you to not be able to locate your inventory, it adds up, and I think you lose nothing by having an AI look through to find duplicates in this way. But then on the other hand, we also have inventory optimization AI that we provide as part of our trusted material platform. And over there, we've been able to sort of manage and curate $3 billion in spend and inventory for our customers. And within that, identify about $250 million in potential savings for our clients. That's a big part of where that 2 to 3x ROI comes from, is that our customers are able to identify concrete opportunities where they may be able to reduce their inventory costs.
Right.
And at the same time, I would also say that our AI is not even just obsessed with cutting costs. It's there to balance costs against risk. And so these are savings that our customers are able to realize without having to sort of give up or go out on a limb, so to speak, and slim down their inventory to the point where they're no longer safe from shortages or stockouts.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I mean, we've really transitioned so far. COVID taught us so much of just in time, et cetera. That's not working anymore because those processes and those models are not going to cut costs and reduce risk. You've got to choose between one or the other, which has been the traditional challenge that organizations have really struggled with. And I think the other important piece there is just that you need solutions and to your bad data problems that are going to be ongoing and sustainable and not project based, like Lily was talking about earlier, because you can achieve these savings, you can identify these duplicate records, but you need something that's going to continually go forward with your organization and grow with your business as you acquire other businesses and you add more facilities, more teams, more systems, et cetera. But at the end of the day, your ERP upgrades are likely not growing with your business in this way of being materially dedicated to know your materials inside and out with AI. And I know again, we're coming up a little bit on time, but I think as we were preparing for this webinar, Lily had shared an awesome story that had happened the other day for a customer where they were in a tough situation, could have been an even worse situation. So I'd love to kind of wrap up the webinar, Lily, as you kind of share this customer win with everybody.
Yeah, I love this one. So we have a customer that's a Fortune 500 packaging company. They have set up data feeds from multiple data sources with us, a classic acquisition scenario like we talked about earlier. And they had 2 critical asset failures with no spare repair part available. So they were forced to pause production as the storeroom team searched manually through their ERP for any part that would work. They did get a hold of their supplier who gave them a lead time of, I think it was around 4 weeks for the part to ship to them. But then one of the Verusen users happened to log into Verusen. We'll try searching for this material, and with the AI, found the repair part that was needed had duplicate parts at 4 different sister plants. So they hopped on the phone with one of the plants, got the part overnighted, and what was originally supposed to be around 28 days of downtime went to 1, saving over $1 million in downtime. So I just love that use case. I think it's pretty cool that you can really prioritize and focus on your MRO in ways like this to create those real-time savings.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome. That is just so exciting. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's a great win and a great showcase of how there are emerging technologies out there that are not meant to replace your ERPs entirely, because ERPs are great for some things, but not for others, but really meant to partner with your ERPs and pull that data and enable those processes to work much easier and much better. So with that, we're going to quickly move into Q&A. Want to get us wrapped up here on time. We do have actually 2 questions that came through the chat on my end. So the first one we've addressed a little bit, but I think would be good to reiterate. And I think it's a great question for you, Lily. It's around, what if my data lives in multiple systems? How am I able to pull the data and it's dirty from multiple systems? Can you give some insight there?
Yes, I would say a majority of our customers fall within this bucket. So we do a lot of heavy data discovery as early on, even in the pre-sales process, to really learn where all of your data is living and what that data transfer architecture diagram is going to look like with you. So we have a lot of cool tools that really help in scenarios like this, such as like cloud connectors, on-prem instances, and we work as early on as we can to get that automated data feed set up, so that you won't have to worry about it. We do the lift earlier to get that up and running. We have so many different scenarios of customers and how this data flow looks that we can bring to you when we're figuring out what the transfer is going to look like. But the earlier we can set up that data flow, the better, because then data gets updated from your different ERP instances in our system with weekly releases, and that the data is up to date.
Nice. Thank you so much, Lily. We've got two other questions. The first one I'll throw to you, Korta. It's around, is AI making decisions for me? How do I know I can trust what it's recommending?
Great. Yeah. So again, this algorithm that we've developed for these different use cases isn't pushing changes into your system at all. They live in the Verusen platform, and you as a user can log in and review those kind of on your own time. And so if you have bandwidth to work and devote on updating your inventory policies, you can review those recommendations. If you are thinking about sort of the data cleanse side of things, you can review the sorts of data harmonization recommendations as well. And if you're just trying to find a material, as Lily's example, really underscored, you might be able to find it by searching within Verusen in one query, because it will search across all of your different ERP systems, and also layer in a lot of that smart kind of data contextualization or representation understanding.
Right. Awesome. That's super helpful. Thank you. Final question, and then we'll officially wrap up. This question is, do you have a formula to compute financial benefits from using a system? So that's a great question. We actually, whoever did submit that, we'd love to talk with you offline, but we do have something we call an MRO health check. And this is a great way to get just a sneak peek of the value from using the Verusen platform. And Lily, I'll let you talk to it a little bit, but basically we take in a subset of your data and we provide you insights within just a couple of days or weeks around duplicate materials, lead time challenges, tailspin optimization. We take into consideration all of these things to give you an idea of the insights that you could have through this MRO health check. Lily, anything else you'd add there that I missed?
No, that covers a lot of it. We do have different scenarios of calculations that we're very transparent with, based on if you're overstocking, or based on like how we're recommending that your min-max policies change, for example. So yeah, it's a ton of detail that we'd love to share with you offline.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. I know we're just 3 minutes over time, but we really appreciate everybody joining us today. We loved the conversation. Thank you to Lily and Korta for taking time to share your knowledge and your data expertise. We really, really appreciate it. We will be sending a follow-up email shortly after this that will contain the recording and how to get connected with us, as well as an awesome white paper that was super relevant to this conversation, as well as state of supply chain report that we quickly referenced earlier, with some awesome insights into what we found there. And then you can connect with both Lily and Korta on LinkedIn and follow Verusen as well. But we're very thankful for everyone's time today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Letty.
Thanks.